biodiversity. Of course, this particular section is focused on technology, and on technology based on the discussions that we've been having since yesterday. Two or three points come to mind. The first one is that we've had this discussion about that we can and we should focus on protection, focus on conservation. We can, but of course, the more important and the most critical thing is the will. Will we be doing it, and how actually you do it? So it's the difference between the can and the will, and it is where the technology comes in, because the technology can really make a lot of can translated into something which is doable. That's point number one on technology. The second aspect on technology is that technology, of course, is an enabler. It can be an enabler, and the role that it can play as an enabler. But within the role of enabling, the technology can also be a disruptor, and that is something that we need to consider very seriously, because here we are not talking of something which has to happen in a more routine manner. It has to happen in a paradigm shift, in a very accelerated manner. There the disruptive role of technology in a constructive way needs to come in. I'll also have just three more points on the initial introduction part with regard to technology and the context setting. The three things that are most critical from a technology point of view, again from ecology and biodiversity perspective. The first one is to look at evidence, and the technology provides that evidence. We are in a position to provide more evidence, and evidence for the pushing the policy changes, for pushing regulatory changes, because there is still some gap in terms of those. And can you show us? And that is very much possible through the kind of innovations that are happening in the technology. The second element is that technology can also play a very critical role in strategic planning. How we are doing planning? I mean, now you have AI availability, you have remote sensing, you have sensor technologies. So there is so much that is already there in the field now, which can make a huge difference in terms of how we plan, how we look at the future, including the aspects of resilience, and I'll come back to that later. And the last but not the least, in fact, the most important, technology can be very, very powerful in terms of both adaptation and mitigation measures. And that is what we need to discuss. So, without any further ado, we have a very distinguished set of panelists here. I think for technical reasons, I would like to start off possibly with Manish and see if we have the connectivity going, and then maybe come to everyone who's present here. So I think one of the first questions that I want to put across, and the panelists can well on it for initial remarks, is how do you see the role of technology, both as an enabler, but more as a disruptor, as something which can really make a paradigm shift or change that is required. I hope, Manish, you can hear us.
Yeah, it was coming a bit faint. Happy to. So, would you like me to talk about the role of technology?
Absolutely. Technology as an enabler and a disruptor.
Sure.
Please go ahead.
Sure. So, I have a very brief presentation. I won't like to take you through all the slides, but let me just take you through some parts. So, I really think, again, I mean, as we look at, again, all of these global carbon dioxide emissions and kind of as countries like India, right, need to again play both a role in supporting economic development, but not kind of let the emissions, right, drive at those go up at the historical rates. Technology will have to play a very key role, and one of the areas in which we are investing a lot of our efforts is in satellite imagery analysis. So starting with products that we have like the Google Earth engine, which has been applied to again do a lot of analysis, things like land use, land cover, classification, in the process identifying things like water bodies, forests, and so on, right, and how are things changing over time. So this is an illustration, right, of even some third party work that's been done based on satellite imagery for you to identify, okay, which sections of let's say a region have forest cover, what kind of trees do you have, and again, and so on. So, so we have been applying again some of this work within Google research at doing some of this analysis for things like identifying the potential for solar rooftops. How much can you again? How can you incentivize again households to start installing these kinds of solar panels and kind of taking advantage of solar power? Some of this analysis can be used to generate also insights, environmental insights about the emissions that are coming from various kinds of buildings, facilities, and so on. And in particular, at Google Research India, we've been doing a fair amount of work in, again, trying to understand and mitigate the environmental impact of also agriculture. And we view agriculture again as certainly, I mean, in a country like ours, as something which is not only hugely important, right, in terms of its significance, in terms of how many people it impacts, but also ripe for a digital transformation through technology. And the key problems that we are right now focused on are a kind of full landscape understanding, where we try and identify kind of exactly through usage patterns, kind of what the boundaries of different fields are, and starting to identify every field, right, as a fundamental unit at which we can start to do additional analysis like farm monitoring, identifying what crop is being grown, various key activities, in particular things like stubble burning and harvesting, as well as long term looking at certain key properties of soil health, in particular the ability of soil to hold carbon. So just very briefly, these are some again views from the tool that we have built, where again simply by analyzing satellite imagery we are able to zoom down on any given region, and this is a kind of a particular view of a village in Karnataka, where we are able to, based on again all of this analysis of satellite images, identifying both not just the field boundaries but also things like we are moving towards a richer understanding of the landscape. What are the sources of water? What are the again the trees being grown in that region, and so on, and identifying activities like harvesting, stubble burning, and so on, so that you can start to a kind of support the regenerative crop practices and discourage and in fact financially incentivize farmers to avoid things like stubble burning. And in particular, one long-term effort that we are excited about is, can we financially incentivize a return to regenerative agriculture, really encourage farmers to go for multi-cropping, and avoiding things like stubble burning, by being able to explicitly model kind of the carbon holding capability of the soil. And again, I mean, what we find interesting is that carbon markets are coming up in agriculture, but still lack accurate measurements and monitoring tools. And it is still an open question, but we have begun research in this area to see, can we complement some of the lab testing that you do of soil samples with analysis of, again, some of these soil from satellite imagery analysis, and be able to provide more scalable solutions for carbon modeling potential of soil. So let me kind of stop here at this point. Hopefully, I've given you kind of a feel for the different ways in which technology can be applied to, again, help support sustainability efforts. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Manish. That was a very, very good overview, particularly from the point of view of using satellite imagery. And all of us have been using Google Earth for ages now, I would say. And in fact, recently, my organization was working in one of the cities where we have used Google Earth, and then we have gone down to digitize 1 meter resolution maps to look at exactly what you are doing. You are focused on the fields, but this was for an urban area where we are looking at waste. So looking at very specific waste dumps across the city, looking at the other features with regard to land use, and then looking into aspects of wastewater management, looking at solid waste management holistically from a management point of view. So I think satellite imagery, drone data, LiDAR, all these are technologies which are already making a huge difference. So I think that sets a very good context. Let me come to you, Alok. TCS has been doing a lot of work on the data side and on analytics and on use of algorithms and software for a lot of planning and different technologies. So can you put some...
Thank you, Ibrahim, for asking this question. But thanks to Balipara for inviting me for this discussion. See, we've been having last 24 hours, as you pointed out, and we discussed various aspects of sustainability. And we are just saying that we have a problem. And we also said we are a little bit late, but probably not too late to get into it. And it's not related to only the nature which we are trying to conserve, but also the industry economics, also depending on the sustainability. So all industries needs to be sustainable. And they need to, I think previous session we discussed about how about small enterprises, how do we get into the supply chain? So the whole thing, if you want to take it to the next level and solve this problem, the only way to do is to digitalize the whole thing. And unless we get into digital mode of solving this problem, we will not be able to achieve our goal, which we have been highlighting for last 24 hours. Now look at the existing technologies which is already there. Google Map we just talked about, and Manish explained it beautifully that, okay, what other things can be done? And I'm sure my colleagues will be talking about the other the products and the facilities available. But we are seeing that we are at the stage, and the last 5 years, the way digital technology has grown, fantastic. I've been in IT industry from 35 years, and I've seen from mainframe to current cloud-based computing, AI, analytics, virtual management. So one thing which I see using, whether it's AI, ML, and then basically we talk about the digital twins, and then use other technologies around that, sensor technologies and so on, and have all of it to create a digital twins for all the problems which you're talking about. Whether it's the forest as a physical assets over there, the trees and the overall forest, through Google Map, through sensors, through other drones mechanism and so on. Or when we talk about the waste management, we just touched upon, how do we have those kind of physical things converted into digital, and then monitor it real time, monitor it, and then try to do the cloud-based analysis, AI, ML, and find the predictive analysis, and not only that predictive analysis, but do the prescription as well. The real-time prescription on my mobile app to the whole of the society which is handling that area to act immediately within the 24 hours or in a week's time to solve that problem. Now we have been solving many challenges throughout last digitalization age, and the three components are quite key for solving any problem. Take that any challenge, and the three components are, we have been all talking about it, red, people, process, and technologies, right? Technology is there and evolving very fast. And it's not that we are dead end of the technology innovation. A lot of innovations are happening further. But people and process part needs to be strengthened at this point of time. I think since yesterday we have been talking about it. Until unless all the stakeholders comes into the digital technology uses and the process is set all across industries, then it will get to the solution mode. As I was talking about the digital mode, digital twins, the process of setting up the digital twins and solving the problem is one thing. But the stakeholder commitment from all the societies is quite important. So that's what I thought. The technology is there, and we at TCS having almost in all the areas, whether AI, ML, blockchain. The blockchain is another important technology which can be used because we can have all the data analysis, from all the regions collected, first locally, then the regional, and then global, and then try to do the overall AI analysis and see what prescriptive analysis or prescriptive direction needs to be given to particular region. So that's what is my thought process, that technology is there, is further evolving, but until unless we have all these three components together, I'm not saying that I will not be able to solve, but it may take a little longer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you bring out three important points. One, of course, the need to digitalize and involve the stakeholders. The second element about this digital twins. We have been working on this. In fact, for one of the cities, what we have recently proposed is to do a complete digital twin for traffic and air bridging. To really see that how traffic and air pollution interacts and how you can actually replicate and control at real time, where you can get into divergence, you can issue warnings. So creation of those digital twins is critically important, be it related to air pollution, waste management, or even biodiversity conservation, where you look at all the forest areas. And I believe even the forest departments within India across the country, some months back, I think I saw a tender from the state of Tamil Nadu going in for complete digitalization of the sector as a whole. And they had all kinds of elements. But I think that's a good point to move on to Pawan, and Pawan has been doing Swapan, has been doing all of these interventions and closely. So can you throw some light on?
Absolutely, thank you, and thank you very much again to the Balipara Foundation for inviting me. I think I'd like to segue a little from and pick up on the interventions from the past two panelists and speak a little bit more in detail about the use of geospatial technology, especially in the area of natural resource management. I think as our colleague from Google was mentioning, there is a wide range of possibilities, and I think that it's still remains to be fully explored in this sector. Several ratings show how South Asia as a region has one of the lowest dispersion and use of geospatial analytics and in natural resource management in the world. In fact, India in a recent rating, it came out on like the 76th rank when it comes to government departments fully integrating geospatial science into their working for forestry as compared to many other parts of the world. Given that we have such tremendous talent, in the digital and in the geospatial technology space in the country, this is the issue of concern. Having said that, I think that there also were limitations till a few years ago, which are very gradually now disappearing. The challenge of the what, how, and why. These are the critical challenges when it comes to the use of geospatial data for managers of land and nature assets. Is data available at the right time? Is data available in the right format? And is data available in the right context? If you hand over a very detailed and complex multi-species map to a forest ranger to decipher on their own, it doesn't achieve much purpose. And I think that there are some fundamental data sets which required to be processed and used, which were not readily available. I think that changes in terms of the availability of sensors. Now we have such a wide plethora of sensors available. There are private satellite companies which are launching sensors by the day. The cost of data acquisition, which has gone down tremendously. In fact, some interventions, especially from the USGS and the European Space Agency, they've made mid-resolution satellite data free for the whole world. And given that the time frequency requirements for forest managers are not real time, they are near real time, the coverage of a lot of these free data sets is sufficient now to be able to process information and provide it at a very low cost. The second challenge is computational capacity, which was a major constraint. A lot of departments, a lot of NGOs did not have the resources to procure large servers to process geospatial data on. But with cloud computing, I mean, one of the, obviously the leaders in this space is Google Earth Engine, the coding side of Google, which allows you to do so much of this online. And many other software organizations are now giving you platforms to compute your geospatial data online. This problem is also getting solved. And lastly, the availability of mobile data sets with such high computing capacity that you can view all this data on the ground is a key game changer. I think that with these building blocks in place, now what remains is a key driver of consumption of data. Why shift? Why shift from what has been going on for such a long time and shift to a medium which is more transparent, convenient, but yet doesn't really is a diversion from what you were doing for so long, right? Sometimes the transparency is an added challenge. Sometimes the inert tendency to not shift is a major challenge. And I think that there are some key drivers for this. One key driver, of course, is climate change. The need for reporting. You know, India has taken on one of the most ambitious NDC targets on the land sector. Bangladesh has a major climate commitment. So does Nepal. I think in the region in general, the need to now assess, monitor, and report on the performance of your nature assets has become very critical. There is the CBD commitments, there is the CCD commitments. So you need to now transparently show as to whether you're losing or gaining vegetation cover, losing or gaining species. So I think that's a key driver. Carbon markets are a key driver because in the end of the day, this is results-based finance. And unless you're able to show and that you've performed, unless you're able to show empirically through remote sensing data that you have, there's a change in the vegetation cover, you don't get money. And then finally, I think that there is a general demand of public accountability on government assets. And I think forests in many of our countries is arguably the largest government asset. If you really value all the lands owned by departments, and if you really multiply them by the value of all the ecosystem services, you know, my organization, we did a study on valuation of ecosystem services from tiger reserves in India. And we realized that the stock value of some of those tiger reserves is 90,000 crores. It's in billions if you just value the water biodiversity benefits. So I think that the need to understand what's happening to those assets is a key driver. So we are very engaged in this mission. We have helped modernize 40 working plans for the government of India in various states and completely turn them into geospatial platforms to be able to actively see what management intervention needs to be put in place. We are advocating extensively the use of two basic tools to kickstart the process of internalization of geospatial technology in the management in this sector with NGOs as well as with governments. One is accurate updated land use land cover maps and longitudinal land use land cover maps that allow you to do change detection. Not very complicated to do, can be automated. We are experimenting with automation. We are trying to use machine learning algorithms in partnerships with organizations like Wadhwani, like Google, etc., to see how we can put these in place in such a way that they can happen on their own. The second is vegetation type mapping. If you're also able to tell what is the vegetation type, if not all species, at least key species. If not key species, at least invasive species, very, very helpful from a management perspective. So we feel that if you're able to internalize land use land cover, change detection, and vegetation type mapping as a basis, as a building block, it'll see a sea change in the way this data is seen, absorbed into management, and can kickstart the demand for many other analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapan. I think you have covered a lot of things in a very short time. The focus and the need and the gap on the geospatial side in the region, the issue of data availability, data quality, and data usability. In terms of those are three very important things on the data side, but also the importance of drivers and what is really driving, and of course climate is a fundamental and a key driver, but there are others which are more on the governance side as well. You mentioned accountability and transparency, the efficiency that we are, the also the urgency, even from a political and from a democratic angle, to show results and to communicate and outreach is also a very important driver, because you even in a system you are accountable and you want to show what you've done, and technology comes in a big way in terms of the kind of impact that you have. So if you can show things, say, on a satellite image or on a Google listing. So I think those are important aspects, and the fact that you have focused on LULC and vegetation mapping. We have been doing a lot of LULC maps and looking at future urban growth, for instance, looking at what kind of change detection and saying that in the next 5 decades, what is the kind of changes that are going to happen, and model using satellite as well as statistical modeling to scale it down to a level where you can actually apply it for different sectors. Moving on to Anuj, you have, as part of Earth Analytics itself, where the focus is on the analytical aspect. So what are the things that you would want to highlight from this point of view?
So just to first of all give a quick background. So I work in the intersectionality of investing, technology, incubation, and advocacy. 4. And the reason that I'm talking about the significance of this coming together is that if we have to get into a solution in terms of technology, it needs to be democratized as well. We're talking about, let's take India, we say it's a $3 trillion economy. We talk about South Asia, which is having 25% of the humanity. But just 100 people in India accounts for 25% of India's GDP. The same way, technology is primarily, when we are talking about, when in terms of the intersectionality, it is only confined to very few pockets of things. So when we are talking about, I was in COP27 just a month back, and somebody in a very senior official in the bank was saying that we are getting carbon credits and various other things, and Earth Analytic is doing the same. Unless and until this is not democratized, we are giving hope to the farmers, we are giving hope to the forest dwellers, but we are not giving anything to them. It's a hope. Without feeding them, it's not going to help. So we need to find intersectionality of things where we have to democratize how this whole technology is going to benefit the people on the ground. And when we talk about farmers as well, 90% of the farmers in South Asia are less than 1 acre. And when we're talking about solutions, we don't have solutions which are perfect. Now, in Earth Analytic, one of the things that we are trying to do with a project called Solify, we are doing an open source algorithm we are making, and we'll put it to use for anybody to develop further on it, the carbon credit solutions or regenerative agriculture practices as well. That's the way democratization of technology should happen. The second thing, which is important, is when we look into indigenous communities and various other things, we had been talking about Himalaya in a big way. Now, 25% of the humanity is dependent on Himalayas. But what we are doing for the communities in Himalayas, we don't have any solutions. So we need to find a way by which we need to have a nature-based solution of investing as well for the communities. And I'm not talking about micro-entrepreneurship. It's too much of, I will say, distorted versions of micro-entrepreneurship coming in. Micro-entrepreneurship means single person, you are just feeding them with some kind of grants and leaving them. and abandoning them. That's not the way. We need to find a scalable startups or ventures which kind of harness the technology that we are using. What's the point of having a technology if we are sitting in, let's say, Silicon Valley or Bombay or Delhi, where the farmers are in a Himalayan region, let's say in Ladakh or Sikkim or Nagaland, cannot use it because they don't have access to that whole thing. So we need to find a way by which whatever the things we are talking, it needs to come out of the laboratories and needs to be going on the ground. And great of Valipara for calling here, like we are at the place which is going to be affected by the climate change the most, Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is the most densest population that we have. But now go back to Himalayas. It's the most sparsely populated geography in the world. But what are the kind of way we are supporting the entrepreneurs? That's not at all there. So what we are trying to do in terms of the contribution here is we're trying to identify lighthouse entrepreneurs in these regions from Kashmir to Kohima, and one at a time we are trying to strengthen the local entrepreneurs there. So what we are saying is place-based investing, which is one of its first kind in Asia that we are trying to do it. Along with that, we are getting technology to democratize the way the entrepreneurs can harness these things in nature-based solutions as well. And it's not going to be fast. It's not going to be in bulk. It needs to be done in one at a time. And when we are talking about these solutions, we need to have these entrepreneurs in the room as well, because they are the stakeholders. They are the people who are getting the most affected here. And in that whole region, and if we are talking about technology, one of the like use case I can talk about it. We have lots of like forest degradation which happens because of illegal minings and various other things. However, how many of us primarily get into the intersection of advocacy and technology? If we use it in a good way, we will find that most of the things that are happening in terms of forest nature degradation as well is not because of the locals. It's somebody outsider who's kind of doing it. So we need to find that these solutions and mitigate these whole things, and also having the adaptability in terms of how the income levels of the forest dwellers or the local communities, indigenous people also goes to the next level. And that's one of the important, I think, an outcome if we see with this kind of a great forum that we can find in.
Fantastic. I think this couldn't have got better than this. You have the view from Google, which is using overarching technology platform. You have the view from one of the global leading firms, which is making use of data and technology. Swapan already talked about what kind of geospatial requirements, but last but not the least, the most critical thing is how does the technology make a difference to the end user, to where it should be actually. And you mentioned about the region. Two things come to my mind. One, we've been using a tool we've developed, which is called ClimTag, which is focusing on the farmer, looking at in the next 3 decades, what is going to be the impact of climate change on the yield at a downscaled local level, at a district level. And of course, we want to take it down to the block, if not to the field level. That is the kind of information, enabling information that is required for. And where does this kind of information come? It should come on his or her telephone. So you have app-based, so it is that kind of technology breakthroughs and technology drive that we require. Also, we have been looking at this entire issue of looking at thermal comfort, for instance, and using the wet bulb globe temperature as an enabler down to a mobile phone level, where you can actually do the mapping of your area with your phone and look at the thermal comfort inside and outside. So those are the kind of decentralized tools that are required. I don't know, I mean, since we are running late, I don't know from the organizers, how much time do we have? Because I would like to go at least do a quick round of the panelists, and then, yes, of course. And huh? Yeah, that should work. I'll come back to you. So I think this is the initial round itself sets the context and what we've been discussing. quite well. I want to focus briefly on one element, which is there is a lot of innovation and application happening on the technology side. The biggest challenge from the point of view of really making a difference is the application and the scalability of it. There are technologies, there are high-end technologies available. What are the factors and drivers and pathways for scalability? I would again start off with Google and would want to know what is there in the bucket in terms of what is going to come out, but also the kind of technology that you have, how you're making efforts so that, to answer Anuj's question, that how does it really translate down to the last mile and to the last person? Over to you,
Yeah,
Manish.
no, thanks. So I think my fellow panelists made some very important comments that ultimately there is still a significant gap. I mean, we shouldn't just take technology as there for granted. There are still significant gaps in how we develop this technology further and then apply it to really meet the needs of the end users. So just a few kind of examples I would give is, I mean, as we started working with some of this technology in India, what we realized was many of these kind of technologies had been applied to other parts of the world and had not been adequately kind of customized for some of the unique challenges that we see in a country like India. So taking again, I mean, our work, a lot of it has been focused on agriculture. So a country like India tends to have much smaller farms, right? As somebody just also commented that, I mean, most of our farmers, right, their land holding is less than an acre. Often, again, when we looked at some of our existing solutions on identifying these farm boundaries, then identifying what crop is being grown, a lot of them tend to be, again, assume very, very large farms and also assume that the same crop is being grown throughout the year. Whereas in India, we know, in countries like India, Bangladesh, and so on, right, in this region, we know a lot of times our land holdings are much smaller. We tend to grow multiple crops in a given year. And sometimes even in the same season, we may have multiple crops kind of being grown side by side. And so there are and then there are seasons, right? There's monsoon season where a lot of some of the typical kind of some of the Sentinel-2 data that you might be relying on is blocked due to cloud cover. So there are unique challenges that arise in the context of our region that need to be overcome. B, as we start thinking about again some of these kind of possibilities like carbon credit to be given to farmers, right, at the level of kind of what they are doing, right, in terms of their own specific farming practice, right? How are they contributing to, again, increase in the carbon holding potential of the soil? Today, we do not have scalable technologies available today, working today. Today, the only way in which you can kind of truly measure accurately kind of the, again, carbon holding potential of the soil is through lab measurements, which is not a scalable solution. I mean, that itself will cost you so much. It's not something that you could scale across an entire region. And likewise, I mean, you have today even access to credit, lending for farmers or crop insurance for farmers and so on, right? Today, a lot of these we do not have scalable solutions because still that whole process of giving them credit and so on is very cumbersome. It requires some manual intervention where maybe a bank whose closest branch is 50 kilometers away needs to send somebody physically to the field for inspection and so on. So there are still gaps which we believe, again, can be overcome through appropriate development of, in particular, geospatial technology. But many of the region-specific challenges first need to be tackled before we are able to deploy those kinds of solutions, right, in a scalable manner.
Thank you. Yeah, that's important because the technology and innovation might be there, but all the other factors which help to take the technology down to a scale are still need to be worked around. TCS, as I said, has been working on some of these aspects for many years. What is your experience with regard to scalability and the possibility of outreach?
No, so I think as I was talking about, the technology is available, and especially the cloud being available, and then you mentioned about the compute and storage. That also is getting cheaper, in terms of, so volume of data processing is not a problem at this point of time. You look at the Google example, right? It is giving you the real-time traffic. Obviously, it's collecting a lot of data, details kind of thing, and then it is coming back to your app. The same thing we need to apply for all other problem area which we discussed so far, whether it's a farmer related or whether it's within the enterprise monitoring. For example, we have an app available with us to monitor our energy consumption through IoT devices and all that, and all the data feeds, as I said, digital twin, physically getting monitored and then passing it to our central cloud that does the complete analysis real time and prescribe to each of my center globally. There are 180 or 90 centers are there. That what is the trend going on of the energy consumption? How many people are there in that office? What kind of AC requirements are there? What kind of lighting is there? And it is prescribing on the mobile of my admin associates to look at this particular area, and whether to switch off or control the HVAC system or chiller system and so on, to ensure that the energy consumption pattern is not going beyond a threshold or it's going down. Similarly, for farmers, there was an app we developed for, we called it M-Krishi, Mobile Krishi. That was a simple app. It was for farmers to provide the information, and that was about 10 years back, 12 years back. And we have now much more data available from the farmers. And he was to just provide the details about his land, that kind of soil details and all that. We had given him some kind of equipments to look at the soil condition and upload that one from there. And that system will prescribe him what kind of fertilizer he has to use, what kind of watering he has to do for which kind of crop he wants to do that. So those kind of apps, I'm just giving a few examples over there. And we have another app, like we have a large system called IUX, Intelligent Urban Exchange, which does the monitoring of the infrastructure for any city and so on, whether it's the power lines or the water lines and oil gas lines and things like that. And that apps are created to get that information and give it back to the people monitoring around that area. That, okay, there is a breakage there, there is a power down there, or there's a line breakage over there. Real-time information to kind of things. And that helps save a lot of energy and then consumption patterns, right? So we're working on these kind of apps. As I said, we're not there. A lot of data needs to be done for our sustainable effort. As I said earlier, that probably our focus is on other areas and not really going into the sustainable kind of thing. Looking at the current 1.50, every organization, like we are targeting our net zero by 2030 or 2035, depending on which guideline we use, SBTI or a normal offset guidelines. So we are all working on that one to see what kind of mechanism we can use it. Simple thing. Another thing is that transport. We have around 600,000 people, and they need to come to office. We need to monitor the fuel consumption real time, as much as real time. That, okay, we know that how much kilometer this guy has to come, because we know his residence, we know his office space. And unless it is there in mobile, and I need to feed him back that during this month, your consumption or your emission was this much, your units emission was this much, your group's emission was this much, and your target is this, so please take care of it. So unless we provide that information back, we won't be able to take it to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you. That were very good examples of some of the application on the apps side. both of you, I want to focus on a critical element which has come up since yesterday and which stares at us quite often, is the issue of how technology can help in having a more integrated view rather than in a siloed view. Uh, that is, I mean, we've discussed the case of Sundarbans, for instance, part in India, part here. So rather than taking an asset and a natural resource as a one continuum, rather than in a siloed approach. So where does technology can come in, particularly from a geospatial point of view? Because that is one of the critical elements, I would say, that technology can really play a role in terms of providing that interconnectivity and bridging the planning and action on different sites, across states, across countries, across resources. So,
No, I think that from a cross-border perspective of managing complex ecosystems, I think that technology, specifically information, and further specifically geospatial information, have a very, very nuanced and very important role to play, because unless we are able to map very effectively the leakages and flows of degradation, drivers of degradation from one side to the other, but also the flows of ecosystem services from one side to the other. Because end of the day, nature didn't draw boundaries, we drew boundaries. So nature works as a constant, right? Ecosystems merge into ecotones and then different ecosystems, but we bisect them further. But I think that analysis of information, which is objective, which utilizes not political boundaries, but ecological boundaries, which looks at vegetation systems, which looks at degradation, which analyzes what's causing them, is super helpful, and disseminating them. But again, connecting this to a previous question on what are the gaps for uptake of this utility, I again want to re-emphasize the why and the how, because I think that right now we are seeing that carbon finance and carbon credits is a fantastic driver of the adoption of monitoring technology, but it's not the only one. It can't be the only one. It doesn't have a universal ecosystem coverage. So we need to further work on the whys. What are the policy drivers? What are the governance drivers, etc. And then on the how, I think one element, in addition to the technical challenges that were referred to, for which we have emerging solutions. I mean, we can solve cloud through radar data, etc. But once the why is clear, the second how, which is very important from my perspective, is the behavioral dimension. How do you get people to change their outlook and adopt new technologies which are transparent, which mean a change in the way of life, change in the way of working? And I think that this behavioral dimension applies equally to communities, but also to government officials, also to NGOs, also to financiers, because everybody has a way of managing systems. So I think there is a need to integrate the behavioral economics dimensions of uptake of new approaches into this overall paradigm. All right.
thanks. Anuj, quickly, can you?
Yeah, so great of like everybody to kind of give a views about it. So I'll give a small example. So I went in Nagaland with one of my friend who primarily works with the forest dwellers there. And what they were doing is they were actually wanting to get bee honey, sting bee honey. And I went along with them, and they did not kind of broke the whole honey bee. They just broke half of it and took it back. And I was surprised why they took half and half they was kept. He said, no, this is good so that the bees can also be having some kind of a livelihood and they can rejuvenate it, and I will go back and get the half again back. But what the consumer will say is, I want to kill the whole thing, get the full beehive, and I will not allow the bees to be alive. That's the way we are trying to do it. So technology, till the time it is one dimensional, it is not good for the farmers or the local communities. It is only serving the purpose of certain vested interest of certain people only. So I have a company in technology. I'm saying that if we want to do it open source, we need to have a collaborative approach. Now, collaborative approach means that grounds up as well, it is required. So I cannot teach a farmer. Let me be honest. If a technology person says they are better than farmers, then we are fooling ourselves. Farmers knows better to take care of their own soil and various other things than us. Second, lots of us, like there's been a more than $1 billion which has been invested in agriculture initiatives and startups in India. Not a single one reaches to farmers, like the grassroots farmers, nobody. And I'm saying 90% of farmers, they don't reach because they are small farm holders, they are useless because they are not economically beneficial to the startups as well. Corporates also don't reach because it is a kind of a thing which is primarily driven with the subsidies or grants. So it's kind of abundant geography as well. The same thing in Himalayan region as well, because it's sparsely populated. We are not going to get that same kind of thing because as a democracy, we don't have the vote bank as well. So when we are talking about conjuncturality and some kind of a cohesion, we need to find that our locals are not going to change their habits. If we are trying to change them by the technology, that's not the right thing. Why not we imbibe technology in a way that it is receptive to the local ecosystem, and we create something which is co-creation rather than a one-sided dimension of imposing on them something which we have created in a silo, which is the AC and PC approach. That's not right.
Good. Excellent point. I think we have run out of time. I would just request one intervention from the ground. Announce your name.
Yeah, I am Vivek Saxena. I am a forestry professional from India, and formerly I was also country head of IUCN in India. So very nice presentation. I will not use much of the jargons. Congratulations to TCS, Google Earth. They have all done excellent work. But the thing is, at the ground level, when we have to connect with the people who really are responsible to use it or implement it, especially in the natural resource management sector, I think that some sort of a hand-holding is required, because if you see in the silo, many of the state governments, some one or two officials who have got some exposure in the IT or related work, so they drive in their own way and they think that what they are doing, that is the best. But working in the silos ultimately results every year in the state governments also lot of resources in the terms of the IT budget that is also being spent. But if it is connected well, it can be judiciously used. So that can be one thing, and output can be done. So what happens? They spend something, and after 2 years, something new person comes and some new thought process comes, that all the past thing has gone well. Now, for the example, I would be happy if the TCS or Google can do some hand holding, especially like presently Haryana, where I am working. Our chief minister has announced that 10% of the area in a village where we have a community of panchayat land, that should be brought under various sort of afforestation. Now here lies the real challenge, that in the village, suppose if you connect with them that the right type of mapping, identification of the land with the proper soil health, with the what type of trees can be planted, what vegetation, linking it with the industry requirement also. As you know, Haryana is quite advanced in for the agroforestry and the farmers expect good returns. So, but all the land cannot be used for the, you can say, such type of crops in which you can have a returns in 5-6 years. So different type of those things can be used, and linking it with the industry requirement also, because many time happens the industry, when there is over supply in the market, then the prices go down. So here lies the linkages, and when we are talking about the carbon market and all, so when we are doing the mapping of the natural resources in real time, if you can develop something in which just on a dashboard or somebody in the app, you himself know, okay, this is the potential of the carbon sequestration or like that. So that can be just of the thought process. As a pilot, you can connect with one of the state, Haryana, you are welcome. And apart from that, as you mentioned that in your organizational level, you have mapped that the vehicle, whatever is the, you can say every official travels or what is the energy. Similarly, you can have such sort of a mapping for all the industries when we have emission reduction targets, and when we have all, and in the real time, you can always have some sort of a, when we are talking of the environmental auditing of the companies. So such type of integration of these technology-based, you can say, reporting mechanism, rather than theoretical mechanism, because when we write theoretically, it is all some sort of a biasness, because we try to project our achievements in the best possible manner. But technology is something in which if you integrate it, it will give you the, you can say, real whatever is then what you have achieved, rather than just using some sort of a jargons that we have done exceedingly well, we have incorporated this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You want to respond? I think we can do that offline. Thanks to all the distinguished panelists. Thank you to Balipara Foundation. Greatly appreciate, and thank you for listening in.